Good evening and welcome to Different Perspectives. I'm Paul Ndiho coming to you live. Tonight we are connecting two significant developments shaping US-Africa relations. First, Agoa, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, was recently extended for just 1 year. Second, I will look at the Lobito Corridor, a massive rail and port project moving Africa's critical minerals to global markets. One is policy on paper, the other one is infrastructure on the ground. So I have a special guest who is going to help us unpack all that later on in the program. But first, Agoa has restored duty-free access for African exports, but only temporarily. The short extension raises serious questions about long-term certainty for investors and exporters. At the same time, Washington is investing heavily in the Lobito Corridor, linking the copper belt of Central and Southern Africa to the Atlantic Ocean, seen as essential to supply chains, national security, and global competition. To help us unpack all this is a special guest, Dr. Sombo Muzata, a US-based Zambian political scientist and assistant professor of political science at James Madison University right here in Virginia. Hello, Dr. Sombo. Welcome to Different Perspectives.
Hello, Paul. Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
It's been a while since you and I last talked. How are you?
Doing okay. I'm doing fine. It's been freezing out, and today there's quite strong winds, so I'm going to avoid to be outside. I'll be indoors.
Okay.
I'm doing well. Thanks.
Terrific. Okay, let's get into it. Let's look at Agoa, maybe from what you've been reading about. What does this extension mean? You can look at it maybe legislatively. What does this renewal mean for those countries that have been trying to export goods to the United States?
Yeah, I think it's commendable that a renewal has been put in place now. I think the one that was there, the last extension went on until September, I think end of September 2025. So we're talking about October, November, and December, and January, about 4 months of elapsed. And then we have this renewal that has come into effect, signed just a few days ago by President Donald J. Trump. So it's a great initiative. We know Agoa is a great initiative. It's been for a very long time, and it has resulted into most countries on the African continent to be able to manufacture, build the manufacturing sector, build industry, provide jobs to the local people, alleviate poverty, but then also grow economies in a number of countries. So it is great that the renewal has been effected, and it is just for a year. Like you said, it's a year plus now, because even the months under which it should have, had implemented, had the initial bill that had been proposed authorized at that time. Those months have been included now. So we're talking about October, November exports and December exports, as well as January being included. So it's good that we've gotten to a point where this has finally been authorized. It is for a year, and you said in your remarks that this is sort of concerning. I wouldn't really look at it a lot as a concern. I would look at it more or as an opportunity to look at what needs to be changed. Remember that since January 20th, 2025, the United States started on new initiatives, okay? There's a new trade policy, and there's the America First trade policy in place. So is 3 months enough time or 4 months enough time to sort of have adjusted, looking at the goals of AGOA and looking at the American First policy? Was that enough time to make that integration? I think that's a question that we need to have at the back of our minds as we have this conversation. So, but overall, it is great that the renewal has been done. It is for a year, and I hope that within this year, a lot more can be done in terms of
wearing your political scientist hat,
yes.
how are people maybe from where you come from in Zambia, across Africa, and right here in the nation's capital in Washington, D.C., how are they interpreting this extension?
So the extension was only a few days ago. I haven't really had a lot of conversations with people to sort of get a feel to understand what they feel about this. But I can assure you that generally it is a positive thing that has happened. And a lot of people are obviously looking forward to more stability in terms of policy, looking forward to a conversation that's going to extend the AGOA implementation beyond December 31st, 2026.
Earlier I was talking to somebody who said that AGOA was renewed over the years in long blocks. For example, like 10 years. It's been going on like that for a while. This time around, the extension is just for 1 year, like you correctly said. Is it more of a strategic tool to increase leverage going forward, or it's something that has to be revisited and maybe the legislators have to come up with a new way to look at AGOA?
Yeah, I think, and this is my personal opinion, I think it's a lot more to do with realignment and realigning the US's trade priorities to the goals of AGOA. When things are renewed long term, and when we think about things being done the way they've been done in the past, I think there's been probably 5 to 10 years sort of periods of renewal in the past. We sort of, get used to that pattern. But then there's a reality that we need to face, okay? Has AGOA had problems? Is AGOA working at the best level it's supposed to work? Who is really benefiting from AGOA, okay? Those are the questions that we need to ask. And if we're thinking about AGOA creating close to $500 billion in trade, and most of that being from oil, deals, we're just talking about probably 2 countries in Africa being the main beneficiaries, if we have to be honest. That's Angola and Nigeria. Okay. My screen just went blank, so I sort of zoned off a little. I'm sorry about that. Yeah. So if we're to be very critical, we need to ask ourselves questions. Has AGOA been working the way it's supposed to work? Who is it really benefiting? What changes can be made to it? What are the countries that are beneficiaries of AGOA doing to ensure that they strategically position themselves to be able to benefit from the full scope of what the deal entails? So there's a number of questions that we can ask, and in asking those questions, we need to know that most likely some countries may not be meeting the needs that they're supposed to meet, and there's a lot more that they can do. So is this 1 year period a period that gives us a time to sit and think what can be done differently? What are the different countries that are supposed to be benefiting from AGOA doing for them to position themselves so they can benefit from the full breadth and scope of what the trade agreement entails? So that's what I'll be looking at. Yeah.
You just brought up a very interesting point. You talked about how there are some countries that have benefited enormously from this relationship, and there are those countries that are part of this quote-unquote initiative but haven't benefited from AGOA at all. There are countries who have been kicked out as a result of maybe not being compliant with some of the terms that they set forth. What can you tell our viewers about some of these interesting relationships, who are benefiting and those who are not benefiting from this initiative?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think for starters, I alluded to Nigeria and Angola being primary beneficiaries because of their oil exports. There are other countries like Lesotho. I think Lesotho does a lot on textiles. They've been a large beneficiary. Kenya has also been a beneficiary on that. And I also know, putting a little plug here for Zambia, where I'm from, one of the entrepreneurs that I know, well-respected entrepreneurs that I know, Mrs. Banda, Dr. Banda, she's been a champion of Agoa for so many years, and she's used that platform to export food items to the United States of America. So there is a number of countries and a number of initiatives, sectors of the economy. It's agri items, it's textiles, and it's oil. And yeah, so but coming to those that have not been able to benefit from AGOA, or those that have been kicked out, that's also a very, very important conversation that needs to be had. And it's a conversation that probably would draw sort of a comparison between the way China trades with Africa, or the way Chinese policy operates in Africa, and the way US policy operates. So AGOA has very strict requirements, okay? And some of those requirements require a political pluralism, for example, and respect for human rights, okay, to be embedded in there. So if a country is not adhering to those things, then they have to be put on discipline. It's the terms that have to be followed.
You know, there are some countries that have not taken advantage of this. For example, there are countries that initially were part of this, but somehow they fell off the chain for unforeseen reasons. Some did not, or they were sending products that did not meet the US standard. If you are to look at it from that angle, what are some of those maybe important minerals or important fabrics that Africans can export to the United States? Is it an open for all? Can anybody send stuff to America, to sell stuff in America?
Now, that's a very practical question that I might not have a response for, but I do know that each country has a system that they have devised and developed for ensuring that the standard specifications for the United States are met. So there are chambers of commerce in countries, and beyond the chambers of commerce in the respective sending countries, there is also standards organizations. I know that we have in Zambia, the Zambia Bureau of Standards, for example. So all those sort of certification processes need to be undertaken, and then individuals also need to be part of trade associations that sort of build capacity for you to be able to export. So I don't think that it's everybody who can export. It's individuals that have been trained, and individuals that fulfill certain requirements. Is your firm registered? That's just the simple basic thing, okay? Are you operating a legal entity, okay? Are you adhering to the basic minimum requirements that you need to adhere to in your manufacturing process? And does that meet the standards that have been put forth? So in terms of the agreement itself, it's very detailed. It's got stringent requirements in terms of quality, because the goal is to protect people's lives. So all those are things that need to be put in place. If individuals in their home countries are not able to meet that standard, then it becomes very difficult for them to participate. But I know that each country has its own process in place that gets individuals to be in the front or in the space where they can be able to participate as exporters.
Some people who have criticized AGOA talk about the level of corruption involved in becoming part of this. At a country level, you have people, if you don't have connections, chances are that you cannot export. And in most cases, it's almost impossible for you to export if you don't have connections with the government. You have done a lot of work when it comes to accountability. Some of these things, this is your cup of tea. How important is accountability when it comes to trying to ship or export goods to the United States?
Thanks a lot, Paul. I love to say that accountability is the backbone of everything. It is the backbone of national development. It is the backbone of economic development. Okay, when systems become corrupted and individuals are not able to fully participate in the system, at the end of the day, it's not only those individuals that are being fixed, for lack of a better term, that stand to lose. It's the economy as a whole that stands to lose, okay? Because if a person really has a brilliant idea and they are really supposed to be working on exporting some of the goods and services, probably they would have employed a lot more people. They would have contributed to alleviation of poverty. So accountability is very, very important if you want to ensure quality services. We don't need to get individuals that are politically connected, to be able to participate in these initiatives. I believe it has to be done on merit. And I know that for the most part, that is a challenge in most countries. You find that it's just a few individuals, perhaps because they are vocal, and perhaps because, like you have rightly said, they are politically connected and they can be able to talk to somebody in the Ministry of Commerce, and that person will connect them to another person, and then they'll be able to get their things on the market. It doesn't have to be like that. We need to get to a point where we can give opportunities to everybody. And I think because of that same way of doing things, that's how come we've been seeing sort of a lot more of, I wouldn't say a backlash. We've been seeing a lot more of a demand for accountability and stopping some of these processes so that investigations can be done. Yeah. So accountability is important.
Going back to your country, Zambia. Zambia has also been a part of this program for a while. It has also benefited enormously. You earlier referenced somebody that you know who has worked very closely with Agoa here. What does it mean for an ordinary person like your friend to export goods to the United States?
I think it's a plus. First, she's been creating jobs for people, the people that work in her factory. She's created jobs for a number of them. So basically contributing to alleviating poverty, but then also it's contributing to the GDP of the country that is counted as an export, and it goes into that equation. So for an ordinary person, an ordinary Zambian, the renewal of Agoa should be something exciting, and it should be something that sparks interest in everybody. Can we get a lot more people to be involved in this? Which other sectors can we explore? And I really like it that you've asked what this means for Zambia, and it's basically what personally I've been thinking about over the last few months as these conversations have been going on. I've been thinking about the expansion. We're talking about critical minerals. Okay, we have oil as part of Agoa. We have some agri export and textiles. Do we have critical minerals as part of that? Probably that should segue us into the libido corridor discussion, but it means a lot. It should mean a lot to individuals that are genuinely interested in trade.
Interesting. How about for the larger picture, the African continent? What should an ordinary person in Kaduna, Nigeria, or in Kampala, Uganda, do to be part of this big initiative by the United States?
That's a tough question. That's a tough question, Paul, because I'm not privy to the realities in Kaduna, but I know that, Nigeria exports oil. So people in Nigeria should be excited that this has been revamped. It's been revitalized. The same with Uganda. I know that Uganda grows a lot of coffee. By the way, I was in Uganda last year and I got to visit the Equator. Very phenomenal experience. I keep talking about that. And I saw lots of fruits and vegetables. I saw a lot of potential in Uganda. So whatever initiative that brings about a possibility to be able to trade should excite individuals. For a simple reason, when you trade, you're able to create jobs. I worked in the aid sector for a long time. I support aid and I support initiatives that are aimed at getting people out of tough life situations that they're in. But one thing that I have known over the years is that aid is not the sole solution. Trade is a solution. Entrepreneurship builds economies, it changes people's lives. So to the person walking on the street in Kaduna, or to the farmer in Kampala, or in Masindi, I've been to Masindi, to the person in Masindi in Uganda, initiatives such as Agoa might seem like, oh, this is big, it's happening very far, it's in the States, it connects with people's daily lives. They should take keen interest in this and consult their Chamber of Commerce and see how they can participate in this, see how they can be able to make arts, crafts, and see how they can be able to take advantage of the quotas that are allocated to their countries so that they can change their daily lives.
You know, I wanted to ask you about South Africa. South Africa doesn't seem to be part of the equation, and yet South Africa has been a significant player when it comes to exporting goods here in the United States. Currently, there's a little bit of tension between the US and South Africa. From where you stand, since they're your immediate neighbors, from where you stand, what would you say South Africa needs to do to regain its place on Agoa?
That's a very tough question, Paul. I think it's probably tougher than all the other questions that I've addressed in this conversation. I just dropped my notes. Can I pick them?
Sure. Yeah, sure. It's okay.
Just give me a second.
Yeah. You are watching Different Perspectives with me, Paul Ndiho. Tonight's discussion is Agoa and the Lobito Corridor. Trade policy, where trade policy meets infrastructure power. And my guest today is Dr. Sombo Mata of James Madison University. We are streaming live on YouTube, X, Facebook, Instagram, and on TikTok. Follow the conversation on Substack and Spotify. Just search for me, Paul Ndiho, or Different Perspectives. I think my good doctor is back. Let's shift our conversation to the Lobito Corridor. Sambo, there are viewers out there. Just before we go to the Lobito Corridor, in case you're just joining us, we're going to talk about the Lobito Corridor. This Lobito Corridor has played such a central role, or in what the U.S. is using its strategic interests in Africa. They're investing heavily in this project. What can you tell us about the Lobito Corridor, this railway port infrastructure that is being constructed as we speak, that connects Angola, South Africa, Zambia, and the DRC?
Okay, my apologies. My notes dropped, and then my laptop flipped, and I needed to put on battery charge because my battery was running really low. So I'm sorry for that, and I didn't even hear the other part of the question that you were asking.
I can rephrase. I can rephrase
Please
the
do.
question.
Yeah.
So I was saying that when it comes to the Lobito Corridor, why has it become such a central pillar of the current U.S. strategy in Africa?
Yeah, I think the Lobito Corridor is a very strategic segue for the United States to get into trade on the part of minerals with the continent of Africa. It's very strategic for many reasons. It's going to connect 3 countries. It's going to connect Angola. It's going to connect the Democratic Republic of Congo, and it's also going to connect Zambia, okay? And Congo DR and Zambia, Copper Belt, Northwestern Province, that's primarily where some of the critical minerals sort of are mined, and we've got large deposits in that area. So the corridor aims to build infrastructure. It's a rail, and when you put a rail line, it's not just the rail line that is there. You build industries around that, and you build new communities, and you enhance existing communities. Okay, so It's become a very, very important piece for many reasons. It's going to bring the US up to be able to compete effectively in the critical minerals space, because based on the reality that we know, when we talk about minerals, we're talking about there's a part of owning the mines, there's a part of extracting the minerals, and there's a part of which is actual industries that are either converting those minerals into, finished goods or products, or refining them to a certain level. So there's so many different components. And when we think of that value chain, so far, the one country that seems to be dominating, especially on the continent of Africa, it is China. I'll give an example. In the Congo DR, I think China has ownership or has a stake in about 15 or more of the mines that mine critical minerals. That's just an example, okay? And we don't see that on the part of the United States. And largely it's because of the different kinds of policies that different administrations in the States have advanced over so many years. I was in Zambia and I saw China coming in. I saw China coming into the Congo DR, and in the early 2000s, in the late 1990s, that's when these initiatives and investments from the Chinese government started happening. And we've seen that over the years, China has been having a different kind of trade relationship and partnership with African countries than the United States has had. Okay. And people debate these things and they can say all sorts of things about this. They can talk about human rights. They can talk about who is a good partner, who should we be working with. And that's a conversation that would last more than a day. But I think that speaking to the Lobito Corridor, which is what we are talking about in this conversation, it stands as a very important project for the United States, but then also for the countries where this investment is going to take place. We're talking about funding or money in excess of $5 billion. It's the United States of America and the European Union contributing towards that support. This means a lot. When I sit from this end and I look at the kind of money that is being talked about and the kind of infrastructure that is likely to be built and the kind of change that is likely to take place, I keep asking myself, does a councillor, for example, in a local constituency at home in Northwestern Province in Zambia, where I come from, does the local councillor know the implication of this? If this rail line is going to pass in this village, what does that mean? Okay, so yeah, there's a lot that we can talk about this, but the importance of the infrastructure, the importance of this project to the United States cannot be overemphasized. It's really, really important.
You know, you bring up a very interesting point. The last time I was in Zambia, I had an opportunity to visit one of those provinces, Kitwe province, that is closer to DRC and where most of the mines are. I visited some of those mines, and I was incredibly impressed by what the Zambian government has done, what those mining companies have done. Earlier you talked about the infrastructure that is built along when that railway line is being constructed, the spin-off businesses that come from that. I wanted to look at it maybe from the perspective of what does that kind of infrastructure, why does it matter so much in today's global competition, especially when it comes to moving those critical minerals? And for example, yeah, they talk about critical minerals for national security. What does this mean for Zambia's national security?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a question that I've had for a long time as well. But I'm going to tell you that the government of the Republic of Zambia, I think they passed a law that a critical mineral strategy. I think they passed an act or something. I know that they've been working a lot in changing the policies to ensure that the policies are responsive to some of these developments that are happening. And so there's a lot of meanings that can be derived around this. They would need to think about meanings in terms of, yes, the policy. What does the Mines and Minerals Act say? Okay, is it constructed in a manner that still will lead to benefit to the country as a whole? Do the policies bring benefits to the immediate communities, which are host communities for some of these infrastructure projects that are taking place? What are the implications of all these investments, for example, on education, higher education? Okay, what does the higher education system look like? Is the education system responsive to all these developments that are taking place? When we talk about critical minerals, we're talking about transition into a clean, green energy economy, okay? Is this something that our countries are just talking about, or they're putting in place specific strategies and they're initiating actual projects that are going to ensure that we don't remain with big, huge environmental disasters that great-great-grandchildren will have to sort out? So it's a lot of things that we can think about. It's a lot of pieces that we need to think about. And I'm not sure if we've been, modeling our thinking to the extent of in 20 years, in 15 years, in 50 years, what are the implications on all these things? What should we be working on now for us to be able to counter if that such kind of effects came into? Honestly, I don't know. I've had a look at the policy, the mine policy. I can't see a lot of communication between some of those policies with what is happening in universities. I'm just giving an example. When you talk about research and development, if we're talking about critical minerals and these minerals are coming from these countries, we should ideally be having some of the leading scientists working on research based in those countries, because that's where this is happening. But that is not there. So am I sounding frustrated? Okay, let me calm down. I'm sorry.
So now, okay, to that point, maybe let me follow up with when I've read about, like, for example, the Chinese infrastructure built in Zambia and elsewhere in Africa. People always talk about how Chinese bring their own people, they do everything, and in most cases, there is no knowledge transfer. In this particular case, when these projects are constructed, when this railway line is constructed from DRC through Zambia all the way to the Atlantic Ocean in Angola, is there a mechanism that has been put in place by both governments to create jobs, to train the next generation of people who are going to be supervising those railway projects, who are going to be supervising those mines once everything, is wrapped up?
I hope so. I'm saying I hope so because I don't really have a clear answer to that, but I want to believe that initiatives are being put in place to ensure that the benefit from constructing and then also from managing and running these projects spills over to the people in our countries. I really hope that that's what this is like. And I hope that our people are understanding that we're not just building a rail line, okay? This is not just a project that's going to take place like 5-10 years, the rail is going to be built. It's the questions that you have asked. It's long-term. We're talking about sustainability here, okay? How are we going to ensure that these huge, massive projects are taken care of and we don't have to be calling every time experts, that came and constructed them to come and resolve small problems? Earlier, I talked about linking all these things to the education system. Are we linking our education systems and making them so that they can be responsive and not reactive when we need certain kinds of services? So we need to think in terms of systems. We don't need to think in terms of silos. It's not just a mine. It's more than a mine. What systems are connected to this mine, and what are we working on the other systems to ensure that when this one system starts working, the other systems are looping in and things are functioning the way they're supposed to function, and there's sustainability in the long term. And beyond sustainability, we talked about accountability. If people are sitting and thinking about the deals that they're going to get and the short-term benefits that they're going to have and how they're going to enrich themselves, I'm sorry, I have to use that word, cut deals, okay, exclude certain individuals, then we're not making any progress. we're actually better off just, chill, getting this not to be done. Okay. So when we think about doing these massive projects, we need to think about what connections are there across the economy. Which sectors should we be looking at? Have we set up a school specifically, or is a school of mines specifically focusing on critical minerals, okay? Production, and are they training engineers? Beyond the School of Mines is the legal system, the schools that are dealing with legal education. Are they training individuals to think about, anticipate problems that might arise as a result of all these things that are happening? Those are questions that we need to be asking ourselves. And have we been thinking to that extent to integrate all of these things as we plan? I don't have an answer to that. Maybe it's just because I haven't checked or haven't seen it online. I can assure I haven't seen it online. It's not there. So the conversation needs to be, yes, the conversation needs to be an open conversation. It needs to be a conversation that first makes us uncomfortable as people, because as long as we are comfortable and we are happy, then we should know that there's something wrong. We need to be uncomfortable to face the reality where we are at right now. Are we doing things the way we're supposed to be doing them? What difference should we make? We need to write a new story. We have an opportunity to write a new story. Is that the way we've been thinking about this? I think a lot about mines. I was born in a mining town in Zambia. My parents briefly lived in a mining town. That's the most polluted place I hear in Kabwe, and there's a lot of other people that live in Kabwe. Whenever I think about infrastructure, I think about mining, I think about critical minerals, I can't stop to think about Kabwe.
That's a good point, because
impacts.
Yes, yeah. In fact, I've done a story about the environmental impact in Kabwe. To this day, people are still, getting sick of some of the things that they don't know what happened. So are there, to that point that you just made, since you're from Kabwe, I'm sure you know people who have had to undergo.
I'm not from Kabwe. I'm going to refuse. I'm not from Kabwe.
Okay, well taken. Since you grew up in Kabwe, right?
I did not grow up in Kabwe. I grew up in Chipata.
Okay, never mind. Let's move on. But very briefly, touch on the environmental impact the people of Kabwe have,
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm sorry, Paul, that I cut you, and I would refuse vehemently. I'm not from Kabwe. I never grew up in Kabwe. I passed through Kabwe, and for the simple reason, I don't want to be associated with the lead poisoning that is there. It's just it's a terrible mess, and people have been treated badly because of these large, massive investments that have taken place in the past in some of these areas, and weak government policies, and not having individuals that can really stand up for them. So so there's a lot that's been going on in Kabwe. I think the cleanup has not been done yet. People are still suffering from the impacts of environmental degradation as a result of mining. As we're thinking about these critical investments that are taking place, these infrastructure projects and whatnot, they do environmental impact assessments, okay? And are we building enough capacity in civil society to ensure that they can actually hold the government accountable? Who is going to hold the mining investors and investors in these sectors accountable for all these investments, and if things don't go the way they're supposed to be going? So there's a lot of moving pieces, and I think we need, I hope that we do have people that have been sitting down and have been thinking through some of these things. I'm not just saying this to sound negative, to be a critic. I believe that I'm an optimist for the most part. I really believe that things are going to work out well, and I want to believe that somebody is thinking about something. But if somebody is thinking about something, are they transparent enough to let us know? Because we're talking about people's lives. We've seen people's lives taken for granted, okay? We've seen rivers polluted, and people have access to some of that, and then being told that this water is clean.
Right.
When we saw at the start of last year, the American embassy in Lusaka issuing a notice that American citizens should not, drink water from certain sources, and they shouldn't be anywhere close to some of those cities. And people are going to say that this is politics. It's not politics, okay? For them to be able to issue that statement, did you yourself as an individual do a measurement of the water to see that the water was safe? If you did not do that, don't run to say that it is politics and downplay important things. And that's things like this make me become a little bit emotional, because I'm like, we're missing a point here. We need to be able to stop and say, can we actually verify what is going on? Do we even have enough people that have been trained to check the quality of water?
Right.
Can we find the chemicals or the reagents that are needed very quickly for us to check that this water is safe for human consumption? It's those small, simple things that might seem insignificant, but they're actually really important things that we also need to think about. So I hope I haven't gone all over the place, but
no, that's perfectly fine. Let's move along. I want again you to put on your political stance. We are beginning to see a shift from aid-driven engagement to investments like the ones that we are talking about, that Robito corridor, the Agoa extension. What does this tell us about how the United States wants to define power in Africa?
Yeah, I think it's a huge shift, a shift from dependency to independence. Countries in Africa have potential. We all know that. Okay. You just go across in the streets of Kampala, you'll be able to see kids that have the potential to do a lot more. Okay. Should it just end at potential? It shouldn't end at potential. It has to be realized. And how do you realize that? If we take away the thinking of dependency, then we probably will be able to get to the point where we become independent. On aid, shifting the conversation from aid to trade, I think is something that I got caught on a little earlier, because I worked in the aid sector for a very long time, and I know that aid is not perfect. Some people want us to believe that aid is perfect. Aid is not perfect. Just like trade is not perfect. Nothing is perfect, okay? So how do we do with what we have? And given an option, given a choice, I would support entrepreneurship. I would support trade, because trade leads to independence. Which country has been weaned off its economic problems because of aid?
Nothing.
If somebody can give us an example of that, then we can say that maybe that's where we should continue. We should hold on to this aid, rope that we have had. But if countries can be weaned off by trading, by supporting businesses, by building industries, that brings about human dignity. And it might seem very uncomfortable right now, but maybe that's the direction where we really have to be. Keeping in mind that aid is also important. The Bible says that the poor will always be among us. We have to find a way to take care of them. So we need to ensure that those social services are provided. But our main point should be advocacy towards trade, should be building industries, should be holding governments accountable. Can we hold the governments to be accountable? Because sometimes investment is put for bringing some of these things into realization, but a few individuals pocket it. Or they select a few individuals, like we said earlier when we were talking about Agoa, to be the ones as the fronts. How can we ensure that economic development gets to the people that need it? It's spread across, and it's not selective based on your tribe. Okay? It's not selective based on which high school you went to, but you get access to it because you are able, you are capable. I think those are the questions that we need to be thinking about. But yes, back to the United States strategy of trade, I think that's the right way to go, and it's highly commendable. I've been working around pieces in the past on aid, and I know that in other forums, I talked to some colleagues that doing away with aid is probably one of the best things that we need to be focusing on, so we can build trade and build long-term pathways for economic development and mobility for our people. And people look at you and they're like, what are you talking about?
Right. Very, very briefly, how does, for example, the Lobito corridor make Agoa more meaningful, or does it expose its limits, especially when it comes to value addition and the exports, the quality of exports that we get from some of these African countries?
Yeah, it's both exposing the limitations that are there, and then also it's enhancing the conversation around what can be done around integration. Okay, what can be done around integration with AGOA? What sectors of the economy can be included in the AGOA eligible sectors, you know. I think we have agriculture right now, there's textiles industry, and there's crafts, right? And you know, and there's oil. If for example certain kinds of minerals are included, what would that look like and what would that mean? Okay, it means that a new set of rules have to be written specifically for those kinds of minerals that have to be included, if at all there's going to be an expansion in the scope. So, but then there's also the other question that we need to be thinking about, Paul, when we think about AGOA, we think about the Lobito corridor. We also need to be thinking about the African Continental Free Trade Area. You know, how are we integrating this? So there's just so many pieces that we need to be thinking about, and I'm not sure if we've been sitting down and deliberately thinking about these pieces. I'm passionate about education, passionate about higher education. It's a huge shift, having been in the aid sector for so many years and now in the education sector the last 10 years. As a student and as an assistant professor, I always think, how is this being interpreted in the classroom? How is this being integrated in the curricula, for example? Okay, I teach in the Master of Public Administration program, and my interest all the time is to see, are we fulfilling the competences that we have to fulfill for us to maintain our accreditation? That's just an example, okay? In this case, when we think about AGOA, we think about the Lobito corridor, we think about the African Continental Free Trade Area. To what extent are the curricula and syllabi in the subjects that are being taught in these countries, to what extent are they reflecting these realities?
Interesting. Very briefly, we almost are out of time, but
Okay.
if you will, talk about the Africa Free Continental Trade Area. There are a lot of people who argue, for example, that instead of most African countries looking outside, maybe they could look internally, let them become parochial in a sense that they focus on doing trade with themselves. Is that a possibility?
I would say that it's looking both inward and outward. It's very important because no single country has the capacity to manufacture everything. You know, that's one of the first lessons that we learn in economics. We learn about scarcity of resources. No single country is able to produce. Certain countries have the capacity to produce, have a comparative advantage to produce certain kinds of goods and services in a better way than others. So being able to exchange with other countries becomes very important because each one is working based off its strengths. Okay. If we think about just looking at the continent of Africa, the call for us to trade amongst African countries becomes a huge argument because I think right now, some of the data that has been there has shown that intra-continental trade is, for example, less than 5%. Okay. I haven't checked in the recent past. The last time I checked, it was less than 5%. If the continent of Africa is trading amongst itself less than 5%, how do we expect them to grow their own economies? So yes, can we have strategies that focus on internal trade cohesion, ensuring that the countries within the continent are able to trade amongst themselves substantially, okay? Mapping out, assessing specifically which country is good at what. I'll give you an example. Whenever I go to South Africa, and I love to buy the nice, you know, they have those beads for the neck, nice, beautiful beads, okay? And they also have, they can make for the head. The way they make them in South Africa is different from the way they make them in Kenya. I worked for an organization and I used to work in Nairobi, Kenya for extended periods of time. The way they make them in Kenya is different from the way they make them in South Africa. You can say it's art, it's the same, it's beads, but they're doing different things. Okay. Mm-hmm. So we can see from that simple example that it can be the same material, but others are going to use it differently and they're going to come up with a different product. Can we start thinking like that for many sectors of the economy and then saying as countries, okay, this will be importing from this country because they produced it better. This will be doing from this place because they do it better. Can we trade amongst ourselves first? Yes, we can. And now can we trade with the rest of the world? Because that becomes very important. It brings about technology exchange, knowledge transfer, and those are important things that we need as countries to grow. Okay, so it's looking inward, trade amongst ourselves. I'm a proponent of free trade within the continent of Africa. Many years ago, I was going to Ghana and I had to process a visa. I was mad, like mad can be. Why do I need to get a visa for me to go to Ghana and wait for so many days for this visa to be processed? I hear that Zambia now has an agreement with Ghana, and most of the countries have been coming up with initiatives to be able to process visas on arrival. Travel facilitates trade. You cannot trade if you can't travel. So there's so many pieces that we need to think about. And I'm sorry, I'm using my hands so much. There's so many pieces that we need to think about. We need to ensure that our people can travel freely so that they can be able to trade. Can we travel locally, internally within the continent? Okay. There are some countries and some blocks, regional economic coalitions that have done a great job. Okay. And I'm always going to put a plug for Zambia any time of the day. You know, we have SADC. Zambia is a member of SADC. We have the Southern African Development Community, SADC. With SADC, I can go to Zimbabwe. Okay. I don't need a passport for me to go to Zimbabwe. We have made it easier for individuals to be able to trade, for individuals to be able to continue certain processes. Okay, I can travel into Zimbabwe without a passport. Okay, and a person will be like, wait, what is she talking about? I'm actually talking about this from personal experience. Okay, I handed over a few years ago, since many years ago, my passport to the British High Commission so they can go process my visa in Pretoria, and I needed to be in Zimbabwe for work. Okay. I went to the passport office and I explained my situation. I went with my ID. They were able to process a travel document for me. So 2 processes were taking place at the same time. My visa to the United Kingdom was being processed in Pretoria. I was able to travel to Zimbabwe and go and work. Okay. Can we make those things possible? It doesn't have to be so much. Okay. And just commending SADC for the great work with that. We can move across our borders. We can facilitate trade. It's not perfect, but personally, I believe that we've done a great job with ensuring free movement of people. If you can't travel, you can't trade. You need to be able to get out. Yes, e-commerce, you can, even e-commerce, it's facilitated on movement, okay? So can we have countries, regional blocks facilitate trade amongst their people? Can we have a single passport? There's been that conversation. I haven't followed up on it over the last, the AU passport over the last few years, but can we ensure that people can travel? Because if people can travel, then they can trade. Can we remove the barriers to travel amongst ourselves within the continent so we can trade a lot more with ourselves, with our neighboring countries, okay? There's a lot more that can be done, and there's a lot more that governments can do. There's a lot more that civil society can do. There's a lot more that institutions of higher education can do. We only have one continent. We only have, the countries that we have. We can make them places that are exciting. And I believe that we are headed in that direction.
Well, if I hear you correctly, you seem to suggest that we need a free travel and a free trade across the continent. We'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Dr. Sombo Mzata.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure. As Agoa opens up the market, the Lobito corridor builds the road infrastructure. So together they show trade policy and infrastructure and how they are reshaping the power and partnerships between Africa and the United States. My sincere thanks to Dr. Somba Muzata for joining us tonight, and to our viewers, thank you so much. Be sure to follow me on YouTube, X, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Spotify, and Substack. Just search for Paul Ndiho or Different Perspectives and subscribe or share and keep this conversation going. For now, so long from Washington. Stick around for a minute. Let me make sure that everything is fine before I let you go. Thank you.